What's up, everybody? Just want to take a quick second and let people know that I am self-supported. I now put all of my episodes on Substack for paid subscribers. I put them up early, and then 24 hours later, I release them to the public on all my platforms. I also have Venmo, PayPal, Cash App, Buy Me a Coffee, Zelle, a P.O. Box, and Locals, Patreon. And all of the links are in the show notes of every single episode I put out. So look forward to continuing to provide great conversations. And thank you all for your continued support. Chris, good to see you. Thanks for doing this. I know you get a lot of requests. You got your own stuff you're working on. So, I appreciate you always making time for me. So thank you.
My pleasure. And I'm sorry I'm hard to get a hold of, but I have a lot of irons in the fire these days. Lots to do.
Well, there's just so much going on. And, it's, we were talking offline about, and you said, you're like, let's pause this and we'll get it on recording. And there's so much happening right now that it's just like, I don't know. I mean, everybody's guessing where this is going, where this is heading, but I don't know. I just don't subscribe to one thing. Like I don't subscribe to, one aspect of something is the absolute, that's absolutely where it's going. And we were talking about, people are going to get annoyed I'm bringing this up, but I'm curious on what your thoughts are on it. But, with the city of London and some of the, like, you hear all this. You've heard all this stuff, right? Like with the Rockefellers and Rothschilds. What is your take on some of that? This episode is brought to you by McIlvaney Financial Group. Their advisors bring a depth of knowledge and experience that allow them to serve their clientele with care, ensuring their financial needs are met now and in the future. Personally, I'm not saying cash is worthless, but you can see what's happening. It's worth less every year. Gold is the opposite. Click on the promo link in the show notes or go to www.mcilvaney.com/coffeeandamike.
So I guess we have to sort of back out a little bit and just say, humans have two modes we can operate in. One is we'll call tribal. You're Dunbar's number 150-ish or less in a tribal unit, and you operate altruistically. So we have that mode that's in our DNA. And we're a social species, so we're always going to be hooked up with humans one way or the other. So one way is tribal, right? The other way is hierarchical. And I'm going to submit to you, Mike, that for as long as humans have done the hierarchy thing, whether we were Aztecs with the priests with the plumage, cutting out hearts, rolling heads down the stairs, or, we're Spanish conquistadors, the story of a human triangle pyramid is a story of humans striving really hard Game of Thrones style to be at the top of that apex. And if you're not willing to be more ruthless than the person who's trying to get that from you, you will lose that position. So my stake is that, yes, of course, people conspire. Yes, of course, people fight like crazy to get to the top of that peak. It's somehow coded in our DNA. Biologically, probably men have greater reproductive fecundity if they're at the top of the pyramid. I mean, how many people are directly related to Genghis Khan? It's quite a lot, I hear, So it's kind of like a biological mating strategy to be at the top of the pyramid, right? And so the people who are there are by definition not nice people. So that's sort of like a general thing. We're always if you have a pyramid, the people who find their way to the top are more ruthless, have less of a sense of ethics or conscience than the people they're replacing. So that's part one. Part two is that I do believe that the people who have hacked the levers of power figured it out a long time ago. And it's not that complicated. You compromise people, you promise them things, how was it put down in South America? Plata y plomo, right? Silver or lead, your choice. Do you want riches or death? Those are the normal things. So I think what we're seeing right now is we just had this unmasking temporarily of what that power structure looks like. And it's horrifyingly, it's gross, right? Because the people who are further rungs down on that pyramid, we have the luxury of not being psychopathic monsters, right? We can just live our lives, be good people, develop meaning and purpose how we will in life. And so that gives us that luxury. But make no mistake, if you want to be at the top, you want to be part of that club, you're going to have to do things that you would not be willing to do if you had a sense of integrity or ethics or of answering to a higher power, that your soul was on the line. You have to shuck all of that to play that game. You know, what did they say in the Game of Thrones? You're either winning or you're dying, right? That's kind of how I see it. Lots of ways to parse that out. Rothschilds have piece of it, blah, blah, blah. We could go into the details, but I think that's sort of the general architecture we have to begin understanding. We live in a hierarchical, pyramidal shaped society.
How long do you think then this structure has been in place for? And if you had the best you could come up with some type of org chart where it sits today, who or what is at the top of this?
Thousands of years, basically since the onset of agriculture, right? So that gave us the freedom to be both sedentary, not nomadic, and to begin to develop the sense of possessiveness. Oh, this is my wheat, my wife, my children, when that isn't how it's sort of shaking out in the tribal nomadic experience. So it's been ongoing for a very, very long time. And what's clear is we have all these signs, right, about some of the ways, and these aren't all the ways, but some of the ways the power structure goes about maintaining its grip, right? We've all heard about like the weird little rituals that they had at Skull and Bones at Yale, maybe just innocent fraternal hijinks, But if you look at what they're up to, they're very clearly involved in what we would call occult or satanic imagery. It's just part of the thing, right? It's out in public, like they show us all of their imagery. So we know that they're invested in some sort of rituals, and we know after, we knew before the Epstein stuff, but now it's become more clear that a lot of those practices involve, for whatever reason, children. And so this is, I think this predates Epstein by thousands of years. I really do. I think this is a long-running thing that is now finally getting some daylight, and it's horrifying.
Well, you bring up Epstein. Why do you think this stuff is getting unlocked now? And before you answer that, the questions that I have in my head, since this administration came back into power, I mean, we saw the Pam Bondi files are on my desk. We saw the white binders, these influencers that took the photo op. And I can't say, look, if I was there, I'd probably be naive and participate in that too. So I guess I'd give them a little bit of slack on that. Maybe that's me being naive. And then you had, Trump said, we're still talking about it. It's a hoax. And here we are. These documents get unlocked. Why now?
That's a good question. Both sides, I don't believe there's a difference between the two parties. I think whatever differences sort of appear to be there are simply to keep bread and circuses, keep the masses engaged in the idea that there are two parties and it matters a lot, whether it's this one or that one. But, I'm old enough that I've seen there's no difference, right? We still have the same foreign policy, the same banking policy, the same scams are run by Wall Street. Nothing of consequence really changes depending on who's in power. So possibly some people thought, okay, political football, here's a chance that this could hurt Trump more than it's going to hurt the Democrats. So I guess that would have been somebody's calculus at one point, potentially, if you're looking at it that way. But I think it was just time. They'd been sitting there a long time. People had been making noises about it. And I mean, let's be totally clear. If it wasn't for Ro Khanna and Massey, we wouldn't have them right now. You had to pass a bill. And fortunately, other people actually voted on that. So it did pass. So now it's a law that we have to see this stuff. And obviously, the DOJ has been continuing to operate extra legally, if we could say that, by over redacting things and not being completely forthcoming. And, and it's just such a hot mess, right? Oh, there are no files. Oh, there's 3 million, 6 million. Wait, there's no evidence of anybody doing anything bad to these kids. It's just we have these videos that we can't release because they have child porn on them and or abuse, death, or injury. So they're so horrible you can't see them, right? But trust us, nobody's on them. It's just the weirdest thing ever. So I don't know. It is a weird question. Why now? Because I'm suspicious. Like, on the one hand, I'd like to think, oh, this is an actual legitimate release. That's great. On the other hand, everything has been a psyop since COVID, right? COVID was a complete psyop, start to finish. And by the way, we find out in the Epstein files, it's not just raping, torture, and eating little kids and all the horrible stuff, but he was up to his eyeballs in hijacking Bitcoin and working with the Tether bros and funding and talking about pandemics and, misleading science. And he had his fingers in too many things for a guy of what he appeared to be of ordinary-ish intelligence. He didn't strike me as a super genius in any of his communications, but he was up to his eyeballs in everything kind of important happening as a fixer within that system. And of course, he was, I believe, tutelaged and brought along by Les Wexner, right? Who they go way back. I think their first meeting is like 1983, something like that. It's pretty far back in that timeline. So you've had these billionaire classy people who are out there, trying to do things. And if anything, we could back up and say, great argument for we should not allow certain individuals to have that much wealth and power. Bill Gates comes to mind, George Soros comes to mind. There are people who do really awful things almost with a complete sense of impunity. Like they're untouchable because they have money. It's kind of a weird thing. So at any rate, I look at all this and I see an almost complete Venn diagram overlap, one circle, not two, sort of blending between the pro-jab, COVID, lockdown crowd and the people who are showing up now in the Epstein files. It's a very tight alignment.
Yeah, when I had our mutual friend Dave Collum on a couple days ago, he was talking about the lottery, right? I mean, the Epstein LLC was playing the lottery and won, and then you're like, well, God, the lottery, how is that legitimate? What a perfect way to launder money. Did you see that?
I saw it. I haven't chased it all the way down. Some people said that there was just another LLC in another state that happened to have the same name, and that was in Oklahoma, and his LLC was in New Mexico. So I haven't personally connected those dots to see if there's how real that is. Well, but it wouldn't surprise me because it turns out the person who was sitting on the head of that lottery commission or somewhere high up it was connected into this whole retinue of people.
Well, you think about every Powerball, you never see the winner, right? The name might come out and then you never hear from them again. And I remember like what was the stat saying, is it 9 out of every 10 lottery winner ends up broke? So you just assume they all go broke. Maybe it was lower than that, but it makes you question, it's a lottery. It's probably not legitimate. What is legitimate anymore with all this?
Well, now we're down to it. It's all fake. Everything's fake. Our markets are fake at this point in time. They're simulacra. Markets are where price discovery happens. Markets are where they set the prices for them to be what they want them to be. They've played games with our silver market for a long time, but also copper, oil, corn, like all commodities have been just like the playthings of Wall Street forever. We know that they're doing naked shorting on things like GME. They got total like scudugious bailout on that, MMTLP, AMG, like on and on and on. It's very clearly it's of, by, and for the power players, and they never hold themselves accountable for the same rules that, of course, they would hold us infinitely accountable for if you ever, strayed across those lines. Our elections, completely fraudulent. But here's the thing, Mike. Nobody said boo about that. They've been completely fraudulent since 2004 when we saw some counties in Ohio record more votes than people who lived in the county, not just registered voters. Full stop, prima facie, 100% fraud guaranteed, statistically guaranteed. And you know what happened? Nothing, right? Both parties just like, oh, I guess I'm going to have my concession speech within 24 hours. I'm not going to contest this obviously fraudulent outcome with great data. Now, that was when they were first figuring this stuff out. They were a little clumsy about it. Now they've got the machines tuned and rigged, so it's a 51-49. So close, Mike. Maybe next time, maybe next time you just work a little harder, you can get your guy voted in or gal, so those have been fraudulent and rigged. Medical information, everything. Like you read like all the stuff that we've known about now about what's going on with SSRIs and the benzos and of course the vaccines. It's all fake data that's been supporting it. And obviously we've had this epidemiological disaster on the back end, metabolic disorders, autism. We have the worst life expectancy of any industrialized nation, not by a little, but by a lot. Oh, and we spend twice as much to achieve that sordid outcome. Any one of these on its own is obviously a cry to look into it and maybe do things different. But this is the thing, nothing ever happens, right? We saw that with the Butler investigation, with the FBI hosing down the roof and saying nothing to see here. It's just this kid. The Charlie Kirk assassination, same thing. Oof, a lot of stuff just doesn't add up, and nobody's real interested in it officially in looking into that very deeply. So you get the sense that our Justice Department is queered, our political processes are queered, our monetary system is in financial markets. So that's what's really coming to a head here. But maybe this is just what happens at the end of empire. This is fourth turning. This is the details may vary, but the arc is the same. Your once vital empire loses the plot. It becomes about self-enrichment. It becomes about really bizarre bell curve sort of behaviors, whatever those happen to be. But they tend to be kind of like what we read at the end of Roman Empire. Same stuff, sexual promiscuity and proclivities, weirder and weirder sort of practices, more and more decadent and indulgent sort of behaviors. And then the whole thing just sort of, the idea, the concept falls apart. Maybe this is just history with new details.
Yeah, the Charlie Kirk, I used to see him at the grocery store, and I saw him a couple months before the shooting, and I still can't believe, I can't believe he's gone. Now, obviously, Turning Point wasn't catered, I wasn't their ideal audience, but the fact that he became so powerful and he was a threat that whoever they is took him out. I can't believe it, and I don't believe that kid was the shooter.
No, all very unlikely. Very unlikely.
And, what's interesting now is, and people, they're going down the rabbit hole, Erica Kirk, and if she had a role and, this and that. And to me, on the top level, she's just not likable. I mean, it's just not you can't sell this, that she can take Turning Point and keep it going. So I find it interesting. Like, here we are, less than a year, not even 6 months. Turning Point to me is they're still there, but they're irrelevant. Now, what's going to happen with War Room and Bannon? I mean, I don't know. Where does that go with all this?
Ooh, some weird stories here. Did you see the story just came out that was a house? I think he and his wife were renting. Anyway, the landlord was a little offended because the jacuzzi was coated in acid. Was the story, right? Like, who brings acid into their bathing structures, right? Like, and then the craziest thing, Roger Stone comes out and says, hey, all you people suggesting that they were dissolving bodies in the jacuzzi, that wasn't it at all. A chemist told me that this type of acid is very consistent if you're making meth. I'm like, that's the greatest. Wow, way to rescue the alibi there, Roger. He wasn't dissolving bodies. He was cooking meth.
I mean, I don't,
what timeline am I on?
It's unbelievable. Well, and maybe the older crowd will keep watching him, just like Bongino. I mean, I don't know who watches Bongino anymore since he's been back. And I meant to look on his Rumble channel, even though I don't trust Rumble, the numbers, just to see what kind of traffic he's getting. But with Bannon, maybe it won't be impacted. Maybe people will still watch because they believe. They're believers. But I don't know. How do you come back from that, Chris? I don't know how you do.
Well, he can't for me, and I think for a lot of people. So for sure, it dinged some numbers. Will some people still watch? Sure. There's a lot of people, Mike, who don't even know what's going on. We live in a bifurcated or trifurcated world now, right? You got the people who watch CNN, and as far as they're concerned, there's some mother of a talk show host missing, and that's the most important thing in the world. And I'm over on X where I'm just like scouring through some of these millions of documents, just being horrified. Like, what do you mean frozen white tuna? What exactly is beef jerky? What are we talking about? Ice cream, pizza, and grape soda? I mean, all these obvious code words for things that are, really obviously, completely obviously to me, are what they seem to be, right? There's no other excuse or explanation for this stuff that comport. So at any rate, we're living in those two different worlds, right? But I do know more and more and more people have finally started to wake up around this. And I'm hearing about young people in particular who are figuring this out and starting to really unravel this and dig into this stuff over on Twitter. More on TikTok, also Instagram, to the extent it's not, shadow banned or banned outright. All right, but people are waking up to this. This is it. Bridge too far, and we're all tired. Listen, the average person is not doing better today than they were before COVID, right? Inflation's through the roof. We obviously undercount inflation because if we do have a tradition in the United States, it's lying to ourselves about economic statistics, right? Inflation is worse than projected, right? Unemployment is worse than we tell ourselves, right? The vaccine damages were worse than we permit ourselves to actually examine. These are all true if you actually scratch at the data. So that economic pinching is getting harder and harder, but now you see people asking the most important question, which is, it's not even that I don't like paying taxes. Now that I know that some of those taxes are going to support fraud in Minnesota or LA or wherever they're running their fraud, but it's actually going to support people who are involved in these deeply immoral crimes, I see people starting to ask the question, wait, does that make me complicit? Because this is between me and God. I cannot be complicit in moral aberrations. And that's a conversation we probably ought to have.
Yeah, you saying that, coming back to Charlie Kirk for a second, I mean, I think I ultimately might have what had done him in, because Turning Point, the younger audience, they're not buying certain narratives, and they're just not buying the narratives. And I'll be specific on the Israel. Mm-hmm. And I think he had a choice where he was going to take the organization, and he attempted to go mainstream. And I think that might have been what led to his ultimate death.
Well, to be the way I'm analyzing the Kirk thing is, yes, it's very clear Candace really did everybody a service by revealing the actual thoughts that were happening right up in the days before he was executed on September 10th. And obviously he'd had a change of heart. He was very, very staunch Israel for a lot of years. I saw him yell at somebody for daring to question the USS Liberty years ago, but apparently he, had a change of heart and started to see things differently. And then boom, right? Off he goes. Now, the people who would have done this, who we can sort of speculate and imagine, but, obviously state level pros of some level, they can take you out quietly anytime they want. Your car has a malfunction. You got too close to a window. Looks like you had a heart attack. They have lots of ways to do this. That wasn't the point. The point was specifically to do this in public, in as public a way as possible. And then, because that's the power of the ritual. And then the second way the ritual really gets imbued with power is you make it so it's completely obviously stupid to believe the official story. And then that says very clearly, haha, we're that untouchable. We can just tell you the most obviously stupid thing forever, and you just have to accept it. And that's a demoralizing kind of a thing. And so for people who look into this stuff, it's kind of tough work, because you have to understand that what you're looking at is both what it seems and not what it seems. He was publicly executed due to its public nature. Right? I ran all the tests and all the studies and did the stuff, did my usual thing. There's not a chance in the world he was hit here with a 30-06, right here in the soft part of his neck, that didn't just go straight through his neck from the putative shooting position up there on the Losi building, where they said this Tyler guy was hanging out. Not a chance. It's not possible. It is possible if he was shot from a much steeper angle and it came in here, but it went down into the body, then it's possible for a high velocity rifle round to get stuck in a body. It's possible. So now we actually have video where we can see some sort of a figure over there on the Sorensen building. There's somebody who was there. There was a figure there moving. You're not going to hear anything about it. They're not going to talk about it. I know exactly how weird this is, because I know a lot of people have been doing these investigations and running the numbers and have actual scientific data. Nobody has been contacted by the so-called defense team that's been assembled for him. And that's the tell right there. He's probably not going to get a good, complete, and fair representation at that trial, be my guess.
Well, and also too, where's Charlie Kirk buried? They haven't made that public either.
Yeah, I don't know.
Nobody knows. I mean, I'm in Phoenix. You think he'd be here somewhere?
Don't know. Haven't looked into that.
It's going into the category of the we'll never know, like the Epstein. The Epstein will go into that category. We'll never know. I mean, here's another question. I was talking to a friend of mine about this yesterday, and he posed this. all these documents. Any tax returns for Epstein? Did he file tax returns?
Good question. And by the way, if the suspicion is he was running some sort of a blackmail ring, the first thing, is you follow the money. Les Wexner just gave him hundreds of millions of dollars, power of attorney, a big mansion, a jet. Nobody's asked him one question about that. He hasn't been pulled in once to say, what was that about? The Rothschilds give him 25 million for his risk. What did they call it? It was some kind of an algorithm. Really? Yeah, the Rothschild Bank needs Epstein's risk algorithm. It's just like, follow the money. Just have the Leon Black of Apollo Group paid millions and millions to women who came through Epstein. Just ask some questions. They didn't ask a single question about any of that. Not one. Right? I just love the fact that, too, also the FBI, they raided his brownstone, right? His Manhattan thing. They never raided any of his New Mexico or his Little St. James properties until after he was dead. And I don't think they ever went to the New Mexico one. Just like, why bother? Right? So they get to the brownstone and they have a warrant because this guy's doing child sexual predation. But, oh no, Mike, they forgot to put on the warrant that they would collect hard drives, computers, images, or CDs or anything related thereto to image storage. What an oversight. So they leave. They have to leave they take pictures of all these hard drives and stuff. And then they leave and they call his lawyer up and say, yeah, such a shame. We had to leave that stuff. But you know what? We're coming back for it in a week. It's not, come on. It's exactly how it appears, right? That's not even remotely how that is supposed to be. So the FBI and DOJ have never run actually an investigation ever on anything, which includes pulling people in, asking them questions under oath, and beginning to develop a storyline and follow the money and collect the evidence and talk to witnesses. I've heard from witnesses who've never been interviewed by anybody.
I mean, even just as simple as a tax. When is the last time Jeffrey Epstein filed a tax return? I mean, wouldn't that be easy to find through the IRS?
That should be simple. What's on there?
I mean, wasn't he a professor? So he was W-2'd at some point, right? Being a professor at a university?
I don't know. I think he was a teacher at a math school at some.
Was that what it was?
Yeah, he was at some. Well, by the funny part, I love coincidences. I'm a coincidence theorist, right? He worked at this hoity-toity Manhattan prep school, private prep school, and the headmaster of that was Bill Barr's father. The Bill Barr, who later immediately said, "Oh, he committed suicide. Case closed." Right? Anyway. You can just yeah. But there ought to be tax returns. There really should be. And it's kind of amazing. He went from that to becoming a partner at Bear Stearns. I don't know how you make that jump, failing as a math teacher to that job. And then I think it was just 2 years after that he started his own hedge fund, but only if you were willing to invest $1 billion or more. Right? With no track record. This is in the 80s, by the way. No track record, never managed money at that scale before. Nobody ever starts their career in hedge fundery by saying, I take $1 billion or more, right? You work your way up to that very, very exclusive. There's almost nobody in that exclusive category. There's very few. But he jumped straight to it. It's amazing. It's amazing. What a guy. Really talented.
I mean, you're at the prep school. You're getting W-2 though, right? They're taking the taxes out. So there's got to be something from that point. But so what is it? When he goes from that to Bear Stearns, if that's the next step, where's all the in between? Or was he one of those people that didn't have to file taxes? I don't know. You don't know the answer to that, but it's just,
I don't know. That's a good question. That would be something a normal investigation would unearth.
And I wouldn't think that'd be really hard to figure out, right? I mean, there wouldn't be you wouldn't have to do too far of a dive on that. So if anybody's listening to this and they're, investigative journalists, find out if he ever filed a tax return. And if he did, when was the last time?
Yeah. I mean, listen, they didn't conduct an investigation because they didn't want to, right? Very clear. And so that says, okay, then we get into sort of Kissingerian, Machiavellian sort of realpolitik, right? Which is like, listen, it's a big world. It's a lot darker than you know. You can't handle the truth. It's weird. Chris, Mike, you guys should just understand that sometimes you have to balance things out. So we understand there were some negatives involved in these white girls, and they were all white for some reason, right? They weren't Hispanic, they weren't black, they weren't Jewish, all white. Make of that what you will. But some girls were hurt. But you have to understand, because of the intelligence and the compromise we got on various people, we were able to really advance these other larger interests and keep the world safer and all of that. So at least that's what you're supposed to believe, that there was some calculus being run at some point where they said, tough world, but we're just going to let these people be victims so that we can achieve these other things over here. Now, they've never treated us as adults and said that was what's actually going on. You have to assume that that's actually the trajectory they were taking, or it turns out that this is actually a set of activities that these people like to perform and that they do. And I mean, here's my theory. Bill Gates didn't have to go to Jeffrey Epstein to find young gals or Russian hookers. He didn't have to. Dude flies over to Ukraine, throws a few bucks down, gets whatever he wants, goes to Bangkok, whatever. It wasn't about that. It was about being in the club. It was access to the other people who are in the club. It's not about, like, they keep trying to spin it as if it was like, oh, some men are attracted to, young females. It's such a biological thing. It's not, nothing dark about that. It's maybe a little edgy, but depending on which district you're in, it might not have even been, statutory rape or whatever they're trying to parse. It wasn't about the sex. This is about the power. It's about access. It's about being in the club. That's what it is. And so we saw that blonde lady, I forget her name, but she's like, well, if you weren't in the Epstein files, you're a nobody, right? What? That's what I think we have to understand is this is a way in which the people who operate at that level know they can trust each other, or that they have some bonding, or they have something they share, and it's only for them because they have to be special, It's something like that. It's not, but it wasn't sex.
Well, and does it come down to, in order to get to a certain place, you have to make a deal with the devil, and is that the ultimate price to get to to get into that club? What are you willing to do?
Mm-hmm. Well, maybe quite literally a deal with the devil, or what you think is the devil, because again, they're all about this occult symbology, and it's everywhere, and they put it in our faces all the time. You see it. It's in the openings of the Olympics for whatever reason like that. They feel like that's always a great time to trot out their weirdness, And this last one, no different, kind of weird. They do it for the opening of the CERN, the Gotham Tunnel, halftime shows at Super Bowl, whatever. They've been doing this stuff for a long time. And that's just part of their shtick, I think, Yeah, I mean, come on. You must remember that. I mean, this drove me nuts. Having people try and defend the fact that you would watch Biden on camera sniff hair of little girls. Like, if he wasn't the president, if that guy was in a wife beater t-shirt and he was just some guy who came over from the nearby trailer park and that was your daughter, I hope you would know exactly what you needed to do in that moment, right? And everybody would, who's not completely defective. But somehow, because he's on stage doing it right in front of us, some people can't process that for what it is, but it was exactly what it seemed, right?
Another guy, you wonder if how he's going to be able to hold his position is Howard Lutnick, right? I mean, he goes to the island for an hour. First of all, how do you go to an island for an hour with your family on a boat, and you're only there for an hour for lunch?
Yeah.
Do they think people that are that stupid?
Did you see that when he was emailing Jeffrey, sort of begging, can I come? He said, I'll be there with my daughters, gave the ages, and my friends' kids' ages, gave the ages, right? And then he's getting grilled, and just the other day, and he's like, yeah, instead of just saying I lied, which is 2 words, he had this 70, 80 word salad where he's like, well, I went there and it was me, and my wife was there, my kids were there, our nannies were there, our friends were there, their kids were there. We went there, we were just there for an hour for lunch, and then I left with all my children and my nannies. I'm like, it's a little odd, Howard. You feel like you have to qualify that you left with all your children? Like, because there's going to be a question like, so you brought your kids. Did you leave with all of them? He's like, let me just cut that off at the pass. Yeah, I left with all the kids. It's just so. Listen, that guy is bad news, and I think we just have to confront the fact that bad news keeps tracking back to a small Middle Eastern country, and it's not good. It's just not good.
Do you think he survives this?
Well, he'll probably have to resign at some point here. But um, we'll see. I don't know. So I mean, at the time that we're recording this, we have Bibi Netanyahu, coming over to give Trump his next marching orders or something, and presumably he's, militating for an attack on Iran, which, by the way, I think would be a very bad idea for the United States. Not good for us in any way, shape, or form. But he's over here, and obviously he's going to be meeting with all these same people. So, who we're talking about here. So we'll see what comes of this. I mean, you start at some point, you have to start making guesses that Trump has some deeply compromising material on him, and that explains his behavior, right? Or the compromising material they have on other people around him is enough to explain his behavior. But somehow I can't make sense of Trump's behavior simply on the basis of Israel's our best friend, and that's just how I am. Because Trump doesn't have loyalty, right? It's not how he's built, right? He owed a lot of loyalty to Elon Musk, for instance, right? Elon put a lot of money into his campaign, did a lot for him, and then was through January, early February, was doing great strides with Doge. Must have gotten a little too close to something, and Trump said, "You're out. We're all done with the Doge thing." And then he threw Elon under the wheels of the bus, right? Remember they had that little fight, that tiff, and it just showed me very clearly that you're either doing what Trump wants you to do, and he's in alignment with that, or he has no loyalty to you. He will ditch you instantly, right? No matter what you've done for him up to that point. That's how I interpreted that. But then we saw that repeated behavior happen with other people downstream. And so I can't believe that he just is that loyal to Israel because without a quid pro of some kind involved in this story.
See, two things that I think of when you say that. One, with Elon, I've always asked the question to myself, and I'm going to ask you. The Doge aspect. I mean, he made his billions of dollars on government subsidies and contracts, right? So I have to believe, like all the tech people, especially with him, everything is scripted. The government's not going to allow him to just do whatever he wants because he's the richest, most powerful man in the world on government contracts. So that's why I even wonder with the whole Trump. I thought it was very weird after the election. Elon was always there. He's always at Mar-a-Lago. Thanksgiving, he's there. I'm like, this guy's running how many different corporations? How does he have time to just be hanging out like this? And then you saw this fallout, and then you saw, Elon saying that he was in the Epstein files, right? He said Trump was in the Epstein files. And all of a sudden, time passes, and they're sitting together again. But, so that aspect, but then also with Iran, I don't know how they can do that. I don't know how they can. I mean, obviously anything's possible, but I don't know how they can bomb Iran right now because one, from the topography of that country, that's just not an easy thing to do. It's not Venezuela, and it's not Syria where they can implode it from within, unless they can buy enough people off, similar to what they did in Venezuela, to get Maduro out and do something like that for a not a complete regime change, but something similar. Which is possible, I guess, but I can't see them doing an all-out war.
Well, if we rewind a bit, so during the 12-day war, which probably isn't over, Israel starts that, bombs some stuff, and then we had 10 or 11 days of Iran shooting back. And so we saw, right? We all saw the same videos, right? There were these hypersonic things coming into Israel, and they were pretty much unstopped, right? And that included, we had Patriot batteries there, we had THAAD, the THAAD defense system, they had their Iron Dome, whatever it was, these things were getting through. And I know that they hit their targets because they weren't bombing like cities. They were hitting very specific buildings within the cities, but they hit a lot of military targets. And Google immediately blurred those out over the next months. So if those missiles had been shot at a military base and missed, you'd see pictures all over the place. Like, they missed. Look at those terrible Iranian missiles. So they must have hit their targets. So that, A, we learned, okay, they can hit stuff with their missiles, and B, we can't stop them, right? So next question, if we do go and start bombing Iran, the question is, well, what's their reaction? Because we have military assets strung all over that region, very much within range of these things that apparently we can't stop. And they do, of course, have the ultimate card to play, which is the Strait of Hormuz. And if they shut that choke point down, that would double or maybe even triple the price of oil very, very rapidly. And that, of course, would create a shock across what I consider to be already very, very weak European, US, Canadian economies, right? We're kind of on the edge on this already. So that would not be a good thing. So I'm unclear how bombing Iran is even remotely in the interests of myself personally and selfishly, but the military people who would be in harm's way of the United States and anybody else who might get harmed in those enterprises. It just doesn't make any sense. Like, nobody can finish this sentence. Iran poses this threat to the United States, blank.
100% agree with you. And not that they serve the best interests of regular people, but I just can't imagine, and again, maybe I'm wrong on all this, them going through with it, because the repercussions or the consequences of it are so great. And how does the United States even have the bandwidth to do something like this right now? Because you still have what's going on in Ukraine. You've got domestically with Minneapolis, and do they have the labor and the bandwidth to handle this right now?
And the budget. These things are expensive, right? So right now, all we've heard is that we sailed a carrier group in, but we have it parked way over in the Persian Gulf. The Arabian Gulf, not up in the Persian Gulf. So we're standing way off because, missiles, right? And all that other stuff. So we don't want to get too close, which of course means that anything we do is going to be very much less effective, because when you have to fly from hundreds of kilometers away with whatever your weapons package is, it by definition has to be lighter, smaller, and takes a lot longer in between trips, right? Because it's a 5-hour flight instead of 1 hour or 10 minutes. So at any rate, whatever we do would maybe be symbolic, and you kind of hope that there's some back room. I think this happened on the first one, because remember, Iran at one point did shoot some missiles at one of our bases, but they called us in advance, told us where they were going to do.
It's like a wink, wink. It was like a wink, wink.
Wink, wink. And they hit a part way over on the side, not near anything. I think they made some holes and some tarmac way over there. Anyway, that was for theater. And so we can hope maybe there's some face-saving theater. Listen, we're going to have to bomb you. We won't hit anything too much. You hit us back. Not too bad. We'll both declare victory, move on. We hope there's that kind of stuff going on in the back, but you never know. Wars can get unpredictable pretty quick.
Yeah, I was watching some of the Pam Bondi on the Hill today, and I'm like, God, we are in a pro wrestling. We are in a Jerry Springer Netflix reality show.
I watched some of that, just a little, and I was horrified by her answers. They were terrible. I expect, really, did you practice at all? Have you had any coaching? I mean, it was really unsophisticated. She came off looking pretty bad to me. I don't know how you took it.
I just saw. I saw a couple of clips. The one that stuck out to me, but everybody, is she somehow shifts over to the Dow. Why are we talking about Epstein? Yeah. Did you see that?
Yeah, the Dow's over 50,000. Why? We should be talking about that. Says the head of the DOJ. Why?
Did you have any expectations for any of these people, though, when they were coming in last year? Or
I confess, I had some hopes that Cash and Dan were going to do something. I really did. I thought there was a chance. And then between Cash, Dan, and Pam, I don't know who I'm more disappointed with, but it's because they're both trashed, absolute trashed, and just unbelievably disappointed in what they're up to.
Yeah, well, she was going back and forth with, and this is what's crazy about all this too, Chris, because I'm like, God, I can't believe I'm in agreement with some of these Democrats today. I'm like, where are we at in this world that I'm actually like, these people are asking the questions, in relation to Epstein, and they're deflecting. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, I too found myself suddenly agreeing with people that I haven't agreed with in years about anything, to be honest. So, but what is this about? I mean, so what actually happened during COVID? Let's rewind a bit, right? So, we know it was made in a lab. We know that they'd been hyper salivating about creating some sort of a pandemic. We know that they'd been running their Event 201 pandemic plannings around coronavirus outbreaks. We'd never had a worldwide coronavirus outbreak before in history until they came up with this manufactured one. So think of the odds, right? And then the whole point of that seemed to be lock people down and get this mRNA medical gene therapy into their arms as fast as possible. I refuse to call it a vaccine. And so that seemed to be the whole thing. And anything else that was a competitor, the adenovirus J&J, oh, that causes a few strokes, bad. So they just wanted this mRNA in people as fast as possible. And of course, as we now know, it wasn't safe and it wasn't effective. If you were of a certain health below a certain age, it was far more damaging than helpful. And we know all that now. But of course, they would have known that actually in the clinical trials themselves, but they hid the data. Okay. So, but what was the point of all that? I don't know, but they must have known that they were going to create some level of harm. And look what got normalized over the past 5 years. You know what got normalized? Young people dying on soccer fields. Young parents not waking up being found dead in their beds. People pitching over just in their daily lives. We normalized young people dying. We normalized injuries that are clearly caused, debilitating vaccine injuries. Vaccines. I dare use that word again. So that got kind of normalized. And now I guess we're just normalizing, rare cancers in young people, right? So that's a very dark thing. If you think about this in terms of good and evil. Evil destroys. Evil lays waste to. Evil kills. It's about decadence, decay, death, right? So they kind of normalized some evil stuff there. Nobody went to prison for that, right? Is Anthony Fauci still walking around? Sure is. Anybody at Pfizer in trouble at all for having faked clinical trial results? Nope. So they normalize that. I'm worried that what's happening with the Epstein thing is they're normalizing another layer of evil for us. And I'm watching a lot of people, Mike, on X attempt to defend and deflect, for these things. Oh, this is boring, right? Matt Taibbi, right? Oh, this is boring. Claire Lemon said that, and Lemon, however you pronounce that, and he went along with that. You got your Shapiros, you got your Mark Levins, you got, you don't start noticing a pattern, and they're all just trying to say, oh, this is not that bad. By saying that, they're trying to normalize something that should never be normalized, something horrifying, which is the intentional harm and damage of innocent children. Now, this is biblical at this point, as far as I'm concerned. This is a moral issue.
Why do you think that they're normalizing that then? I mean, financial? To move on from this as quick as possible and say it's no big deal, in your view?
I actually put it in a larger suite of things that, Mike, I think my country is, not my country alone. Let's not make this too personal. Western civilization's under attack. Once is an accident, twice is coincidence, but 3 times is enemy action. Right? So my borders were not laid open accidentally. That was a huge multi-billion-dollar misadventure to just flood my country with whomever, unvetted, vaccinated or not, check if they have any weird tropical diseases or not, didn't matter. So that was an intentional policy.
And you saw that, Chris. I mean, not to interrupt you, but you saw that. I mean, you were in Darien with Michael Yon and Brett Weinstein, and I mean, you saw it firsthand. For people listening, if they don't remember, Chris was there.
Yeah, took a trip to Panama, to the edge of the road that takes you to where the road doesn't go south any further, and then into a dugout canoe and 4 hours up a river to get to the camps where people were first coming out of the jungles. And I thought I was going to be seeing the huddled, the poor, tattered clothes. There are these Chinese people coming out of the jungle with like better hiking gear than I've ever owned. Like we're talking $1,000 boots, Gucci bags. It's like, And then you'd get these maps, they give you this map and they would be different languages. So if you happen to be speaking Afghanistan or if you were speaking Chinese, you'd open up the map and they would show you all the places you could stop, hundreds of places between that place at the Darien Gap. You come out of Panama, take a bus, however you get there, Costa Rica, Nicaragua, keep going, Mexico, all the way up. And they would show you all the places you could stop where people spoke your language, and you had resources there. And the Red Cross was producing these maps, the ones I saw. So you had all these, like, it wasn't like a few people coming in. This was a rutted path, foot deep, worn down, and it was a multi-billion-dollar enterprise. And when we were in Panama City, there were 69 NGOs there, Catholic organizations, the Hebrew Immigration Society was there, the IOM out of the UN, on and on and on. There was billions of dollars invested in getting these people from wherever they were in the world to come into the United States. So we talked with this one Afghan guy, nice young guy, 25, spoke great English. His father was an interpreter, he said, for the US. So anyway, so he learned good English. He said, how did you end up here? He said, oh, I was in my village and I get this notification on my phone and it's through some, I forget, through WhatsApp. So but he gets this notification, says, you know, leaving tomorrow, flight for the US, and you can get into you can go in. So somebody was sending app notifications to villagers in Afghanistan that, hey, let's go. And they were being brought in. So none of this was accidental. That's not some guy decides to have a better life and leaves, his family tear-stricken, starts walking across the earth. They had plane tickets, flights, buses, food, connections, on and on. And it's such a well-oiled path. We talked with this one Chinese, most of the Chinese wouldn't talk to us, but this one Chinese girl did very briefly. She only answered one question. I said, hey, how long will it take you to get from this camp in the middle? We're in the middle of the jungle. Like, how long to get from this camp to where you're going? And she says, in 10 days, I'll be in New York with a driver's license. She had the whole path mapped out, including which DMV you go to in New York that's staffed by other Chinese nationals who'd gotten through the Rubicon, across the Rubicon, through all that, right? So that was not accidental, right? Remember, once is an accident. That wasn't accidental. What happened with the transgender stuff? There are 2,900 clinics now giving people hormones and cutting off healthy breast tissue. And it's like, when did this industry, how did it just erupt? It didn't. It was funded and it was very well organized. And there were people behind that, very intentional, right? The breakdown of the nuclear family, the absolute war on being white or male, right? None of this is accidental. This is all funded. We can look at the funding sources. So you look at this, they're attacking the pillars of our culture. And so, long way of answering, why try and normalize something like pedophilia and this gross stuff through the Epstein stuff? Well, because the WEF told us, 2016, they had this kitschy little 1.5 minute video. Started out with the most famous one, which is you'll own nothing and be happy. They had that one. Number 4 was you'll eat less meat. Hey, kind of weird. Accidentally, we have the lowest beef herds in the United States since 1957 and some of the highest beef prices ever. But number 8 was the one that caught me in that whole stick of things that were how they saw the world by 2030. And number 8 was Western values will have been tested to the breaking point. Why Western values? Why not African values? Why not Eastern values? Why not Jewish values? Why not? I don't get it. Western values, they said, will have been tested to the breaking point. What's a Western value? I don't know. Peace, liberty, individualism, private property rights, certain things, right? But certainly the nuclear family and a sense of progress and of agency, that my body is my own. So they took that away with COVID. Your body is not your own. And they're taking away the idea that you have any agency as a parent to raise your own children the way you want. Hey, you're not going to validate your child's new pronouns. We're going to take them away from you and put them into this machine over here, which obviously does terrible things to them. So we're under attack. And by the way, this attack has been spelled out beautifully plenty of times. This is in communist handbooks, Saul Alinsky's, Rules for Radicals. This is a socialist takeover. And it's very intentional. It's very well funded. It's gotten to the point that it has certain critical mass, but you absolutely want your targets to be off balance, unable to process stuff, shocked, just so overwhelmed with the pace of events that you can't ever mount a decent resistance to any one thing, and nothing ever gets adjudicated. Right? COVID's already back there. You've already felt the sense I do that we've lost our opportunity to hold anybody accountable. And that'll happen with Epstein. It'll be something after that, something after that. But when we wake up, we all have a digital currency playpen. We all have Palantir, sectioning a lot, blah, blah, blah. This is the program that they've been running for a while. And it involves the tech bros. It involves these socialist-minded billionaires. It involves money. It's all that stuff happening at once. So long way of answering a pretty simple question.
How much energy are you exerting to the midterms, if any?
None. Again, I don't really believe there's a big difference. I actually, at this point, if the Democrats take back either or both the Senate or the House, I'm just going to kind of shrug and you will have a real stalemate at that point in time. And if that happens, it happens.
Yeah, I feel the
How
same.
about you?
I feel the same. It's funny how I haven't been following this stuff as long as you have or others that I've had on here, but I'm here. You hear when you start to come back a second time, from 2020, 22, 24. I hear the same. I'm hearing the same things again. Right, this is the most important election ever.
Mm-hmm.
You could do your part. Civil war, which I actually think we're already technically in a civil war, and you're seeing that right now. What's happening in Minneapolis, how the city and counties or the city and states are not complying with federal. I mean I think that's a civil war.
Mm-hmm. I would agree.
But are people going to take arms to the streets, and are we going to have Mad Max? Because you're hearing that again. I'm starting to hear that again this year. If we even have a midterm.
I don't know. I'm not sure about that, just because not that it's not deserved, but just people's lives are still pretty far from the edge where they normally will pick up arms and pitchforks and torches and all that. But we don't have a functioning democracy at this point in time. We've known that for a long time, right? The will of the people is not reflected in the outcome of the legislative actions. We've known that. Right? There's almost no connection between what people want and what actually gets passed. There's a huge correlation between what corporations want or power structures want and what gets passed. So, I mean, here's the most recent example at the time of this recording is this voter act, right? Real ID, right? I mean, we should be like the idea that you would have to present an ID to vote, right? The Democrats are like, oh, this is the most racist thing ever. Black people don't have access to these things, but you just need an ID for everything else in life, to get a fishing license, to drive a car, on and on and on, get a bank account. Like, it's required for every other facet of life. But somehow with voting, that's a bridge too far. Look, we all know what that's about. We know that we've had vast voting irregularities, to be kind, for a very long time, and they like it that way. And this leaves their power structure uninterrupted. We found, because of the NGOs, there were 49,000 NGOs operating in Minnesota alone. 49,000. There's like 10,000 restaurants in the entire state of Minnesota. So every time you're driving down and you see a restaurant, imagine there's 4 NGOs hidden back there somewhere. And I would submit to you, half of those are pure fraud, probably. California, 250,000 NGOs. What? And so this just raises the specter. Like we have to ask, Mike, what percent of our economy is actually fraud? Like, maybe they're not going after it, because if you do, you crater the economy, because it's like 25% fraud, 20%. Like, it's possibility.
Well, when I had Ed Dowd on, I mean, he brought up an interesting point of, they give all these people money, so they spend it in the economy to prop up the numbers.
It is the economy.
Well, and then you look at, the fraud's much bigger. It's always worse than what even you imagine it is, right? Like, so what's happening every single city. And here's the thing I wonder with this, another timing question, and I'm running out of time here with you, but, you get the Nick Shirley video, because this isn't something that just popped up, this whole fraud in Minnesota. Right. They've known about this a long time. Republicans could have used this in 24, right? I mean, if they really wanted to pull that card, they didn't. So you get the Nick Shirley video, and then right after, ICE is there, or shortly after.
Mm-hmm.
Was that coincidence?
Poke, right? No, it's not a coincidence. So that's why you have to wonder, what everything's a psyop, right? Everything's sort of fake and a psyop at this point in time. Like what is the point of a psyop like this? You can feel, again, the intentionality behind it. The way I interpret it is somebody is trying to provoke us into something, some reaction. And then they can react to the reaction, right? So remember, the Patriot Act, they tried to trot it out after the Oklahoma City bombing, right? And if you look into the Oklahoma City bombing and you dive into it, there's not a chance in the world the damage we saw in that Murrah building was caused by a fuel-air coupled ANFO truck explosion. Not a chance, right? So there are other bombs in there. It's a much more complicated story than they tried to sell. So anyway, it happens. And the first thing they do is they try to get the Patriot Act out. It wasn't called that then. It had some other name, but it's like on the shelf big old fat, trampling of civil rights and other things like that. So they tried it too early. Didn't quite fly. There were still senators and congressmen like, oh no, it's not how our country operates. And then they had the first of two WTC bombings, that truck bomb, van bomb in the basement. They tried it again. It wasn't quite right, or it wasn't quite big enough. And then, of course, we had 9/11, and then that, of course, was sufficient. We get the Patriot Act. The reaction is 9/11, I believe, was the setup to get that Patriot Act through. That was one of the prime reasons that it was allowed to happen, or even an inside job, however you want to look at it. Plenty of data to support either conclusion. But it happened, and then this 2,900-page bill comes out, and next thing you know, boom, you got NSA data centers, and everything's being vacuumed up, and we have no real rights, and you and I have to take our belts and shoes off to get through.
And you look at these people, and you look at these people that are, giving you a hand job as you come through.
Yep.
I mean, ugh.
And they never explained why it was just public airplanes that you had to go through that. Of course, if you had a private airplane, you just go and get on. There's no groping involved in getting onto your personal 737. Right.
Unbelievable. Well,
it's just the game.
Well, and how, we've become more, it's just each decade that passes, it just becomes more surveillance, more the slow burn. And that's why I come to conclusions sometimes with all this. Will this just slow burn continue?
Well, that's the trend, and so it's probably going to continue that way, right? Until something arrests that. Now, from a let me widen out just a touch though. So you can feel the inexorability of getting us all more controlled and into these control things. So everything about Patriot Act was about control. These are control freaks at heart, right? And they believe that if they can just really tell you everything, right? You have 15-minute cities, what you can eat, what you can't eat, what you can spend your money on, how much free time you should have. This is what they're aiming for, right? They just want to control it all because it's how they're built. They don't believe in what I believe in, and maybe you do, which is that the invisible hand of Adam Smith is the thing that gives us our prosperity. It's you making individual decisions, me making individual decisions under an auspice of a protective umbrella for allowing my intellectual property and efforts to be protected. I have property. I create it. It's mine. That causes people to work. Incentives shape outcomes. The socialists don't get that at all. They believe that somehow prosperity comes from laying more regulations on and being more in your face and having committees decide more and more and more things. And now we're seeing, like in California, I don't know how many businesses they've lost in the last year. It's like 50, right? But they just had one of their last remaining refineries just shut down months ahead of schedule because they're like, we're out. Valero tapped out. They lost Wells Fargo, their signature bank. They hightailed it out of there for Texas, on and on and on, because California is proving that with more and more and more controlling oversight and regulations, you don't end up with more prosperity. You end up with less. Okay, they don't understand that part, but still they're going to keep on this path. So if it's more and more and more and more control, and then we have all this stuff sort of layered in where there's going to be this AI undercurrent that's holding it all together. AI makes people stupid quick, really quick. I've seen people already default their thinking processes. They have to see what Grok thinks about it, or Claude, or ChatGPT, right? They almost like are paralyzed. They don't trust themselves anymore because they have access to this really intelligent thing. It's like their new personal advisor. They can't make a move without. So let's imagine it's 10 years from now. This slow burn has continued. We've now outsourced all of our thinking. Like, machines are run by AI, factories are run by AI, decisions are made by AI. It's all done. And then for some reason, I don't know, the magnetic field weakens, the sun burps, something happens, we get in a nuclear war, there's an EMP, but for some reason, the grid goes down. You now have a situation where nobody knows how to do anything anymore. Like, just doesn't know. I submit we're probably already there. You could go to a steel factory, and there's a guy who's been working the foundry his whole life. He understands steel. He understands carbon ratios. He understands mixing. He understands all of that. But fundamentally, the way he would make a specialty alloy is by pressing a certain amount of buttons in the right order on a control panel. And if the control panel went away, he'd be like, same as me. He'd be like, oh, we'll have to bootstrap this. and sure, he would have a much better starting point. But what I'm saying here is that we've created a very, very, very complicated system. We are now going to imbue it with 100% agency power and control. We're going to lean on it. And it's a really fragile situation because if for whatever reason it blinks out, right? Well, then we have people who literally are unable, do not have the skills to even know how to get things started again. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I was just talking to a friend of mine about this, his property, and he was saying how he's getting a little bit older, and he's like, I can't find any young people to help me with some of the maintenance of apple trees, and they don't know how to do it. I can't find anybody to do this stuff. Help me with it.
No, it's a very real thing. Things atrophy very quickly, right? If you're bedridden, within 2 weeks, your muscles start to, right? That's part one. Part two is that if you don't learn these skills by a certain age, it's very hard to learn them later on. It just is. So my childhood was, you know, making really rickety stairs to go up to tree forts that were, falling down in the thing. And, we had some tough lessons in physics when I was growing up. It's part of life, right? But, I think you have to be a Renaissance person in a sense to understand, like to work in a farm. You kind of have to have animal husbandry, soil chemistry. You have to know welding, of course, carpentry for sure, small engine repair, diesel mechanics, probably depending on the size of your farm. I mean, it's just like you have to know a lot of things, right? You just do. And so that's coming together, that synthesis of having those disparate sort of skill sets. I think that's where you learn how things actually work. It's where creativity comes from. It's where you're actually a fairly robust worker at that point because those skill sets translate. They map like an associative tree into a whole new area, like you can take from farming and go into finance because it's going to be the same idea set, which is A connects to B. I have to think through D before I get to C, on and on. And I do despair. I think a lot of young kids today because it's all scroll time. They're not learning. They're not learning the skills they need. And the way I talk about this, Mike, is that they say if you learn a second language before your hormones hit, so let's say 13, if you learn a second language or third or fourth or fifth before your hormones hit, your brain is still plastic enough you can learn that without an accent. You can be accent free in your second or third or fourth language. Afterwards, you'll always have an accent. If it's after you're 26, 27, you're going to have a heavy accent, right? Because that's just how we're wired up as an organism. So the way I look at this is if we have these kids, they kind of didn't use their childhood learning how to work and work effectively, that if they try and pick that up in their 20s or 30s or 40s, they're going to find they have an accent in that skill set, right? It's going to be pretty heavy. It's not going to be a native thing. It's always going to be a little bit of a struggle. And I really worry that that's what we're missing out on. And hopefully there'll be a back to the land or a back to the skill set movement here at some point where we realize that the technology we're using is both enabling and disabling at the same time. It's got both of those features embedded within it.
Yeah, last thing I was going to say here is, I was on my road trip last summer and in parts of upstate New York where there's no cell service. I mean, you're in town and there's just nothing unless you went into the restaurant with Wi-Fi. And I thought to myself, I'm like, I remember a time where we didn't have these things. But man, you take this away from people for a couple hours, a day or two, they're going to go nuts. Now, the good thing is they won't be able to organize, so it'll be localized. But people will, they'll lose it.
Yeah, a friend of mine said that if GPS went out suddenly, there would be parents who wouldn't know how to get to the school to pick their kids up.
I believe that.
They just follow the map on the phone.
Yeah. Yeah. Where can people find you?
Hey, let me say you can find me right here. This is peakprosperity.com. And this is the front page of my website as of today. This thing right here, this is the Renaissance Report. So this is my new thing I'm putting out. And this first one is about the death of money. So that's my big signature piece, big, heavy thing, I think, through a lot of things and talk about it. But obviously, we have a lot of content ongoing. So peakprosperity.com. That's number one. Number two would be at Twitter, Chris Martenson. That's just at Chris Martenson. So that's it.
As always, I enjoy our conversations. I look forward to continuing to follow your work, and there's going to be a lot to talk about this year. So I look forward to the next one. Thanks, Chris.
Well, thank you, and tell everybody, please, please, please get resilient. This is gonna get bumpy. It just will. So please get resilient.
Mic drop.